Hi, happy Friday, everyone, and happy September. Hope you guys are doing really well. Welcome back to our ŌNCE Club Weekly. This week we have got the lovely Helen Baynes joining us to talk about conducting the perfect appointment. How are you, Helen?
I'm good, thank you. How are you, Dom?
I'm good. I just realised I'm in full cashmere regalia, but it's actually quite warm now. So you know, we'll see if I'm
comfortable Friday gear.
Exactly. So you know, in terms of your experience, I think even with being in a digital space, I think creating an appointment and having that experience with your client, it can really sometimes make or break a relationship with
definitely
having these, you know, just discussing these kind of points where what we think is important hopefully will sort of provide some value if you're thinking about conducting an appointment or you've done one before and you want to know sort of how to, you know, make sure that you're giving them a really great experience. But I think, you know, there's a few main areas that you really have to think about. There's definitely the preparation of said appointment, you know, what you're discussing with the client before they come, you know, the venue and how it looks, the actual event itself in terms of, you know, demeanor and also anticipation. I think there's lots of examples of, you know, you can be told that a client can tell you they want 3 things and then they'll ask you for 3 more things. So having a certain sense of anticipation, I think helps. And then also looking into the follow-up, what that looks like and what that, you know, means after. So, you know, they continue to come back as well. So Helen, I mean, you know, even with this kind of, obviously you were with Harrods and coming to online, there was still this need at Net-a-Porter to have in-person appointments. I remember from my experience, it was actually a really great way just to deepen the rapport as well.
Definitely, because when you're building a relationship digitally, you have to be very intuitive. I mean, actually, it's so much easier now because everybody's got a presence. Most people do, got some kind of digital presence, so you can sort of, at the beginning of meeting somebody, you can find ways to build a rapport with them because you can sort of understand more about them other than guessing. Just so, for example, in our case, we would be guessing based on what they bought. But you know, so your relationship starts from a limited amount of information, and then as you speak to them more, it grows as you get to know them. But I always used to find that, and I suppose it's also worth pointing out that in the early days of Net-a-Porter, most, like 99% of personal shopping was digital, and it was that way for a long time. And it would be the key clients that you met once who would be coming to visit, for example, maybe lived outside the UK. Yeah. I can remember some clients suggesting that we meet when they were coming to stay in London. I used to have a really great client in Kuwait who was really long-standing. But I think also it became part of the conversation that as we got to know them better, we would always say, you know, oh, if you're coming to London, you know, it would be so nice to meet up. And actually, so sometimes the appointment would just be about building the relationship and going for tea somewhere. Yeah. Whereas with other, so maybe that would be almost like the first appointment, and then the next appointment would be more product based because but regardless, it's that whole thing of that in-person meeting that just takes the relationship to the next level when you've got you know, a digital conversation going on, and it means you can just, to have been able to have built a relationship remotely, you've got to have established a connection there. You have to work much harder at that connection. And then when you meet, it's just that, you know, it can be that amazing explosion of connection. It makes it easier. Because it makes it so much easier. And then I know it used to, I knew, once I'd met someone, I intuitively knew what would suit them, and it made everything so much easier. So you almost only really need to meet them once, probably. Yeah. I mean, of course, you know, now we've got more digital face-to-face capability, and that's becoming an increasing way of everybody's way of working. So I guess that, you know, that almost can become the segue and can be really helpful in terms of building that rapport. But I do think there's still nothing quite like, you know, the in-person rapport that you get.
For sure. And that's something that I always realize with meeting clients versus having a conversation with them, say on the phone or what have you, is that not all the time, but some clients are quite limited in, if you want to call it, you know, the jargon, or if you want to call it sort of the lingo, and they're not as forthcoming as you think that they're being. So sometimes in terms of just actually getting a sense of what they're looking for versus what they're asking for, sometimes a little juxtaposing, and being able, like you said, to kind of glance your eyes upon them, you seem to be able to kind of connect all the dots. Much harder.
Exactly.
So there's definitely been times when I've had to, you know, essentially I'm doing appointments off the first, literally the first time I'm meeting them. And even though we've had sort of some conversations online, like whether it's WhatsApp or whatever it is on the phone, and then you sort of meet them there, and thank goodness, and I think this comes with experience for sure, I've kind of adjusted for a little bit of everything, you know, even just in terms of sizing. As an example, a client can tell you, I'm a 12, I'm a 12, I'm a 12, I'm a 12, this is what I want in this type of gown. And I'm going, this is where I think, you know, having great brand knowledge goes a long way, because
Yeah,
I'm like, you know, I've had a client say I'm a 12, and I'm like, you know, this is the size we have in this, I think there was a Marquesa dress, and it came and it was so small, and I luckily pulled the biggest size for her, because I just thought, if it's small and it's not quite, we can have both sizes. And, you know, sometimes just knowing when to pick, you know, alternative sizes for a fit, or being able to kind of, you know, I always get the women to let me know, sort of, again, we come back to this feeling of what is it that you're trying to achieve from a look, as opposed to just saying, what pieces do you need?
Yeah, exactly. Because if the conversation is functional and about needs, it's not the same. Because actually, none of us need anything really, do we?
Yeah.
So, and it is all about feeling. And I think it's also about inspiring them.
Yes,
which is about then creating that feeling. So depending on the nature of the appointment and what the client thinks they're looking for, it's that whole thing of being able to deliver something that exceeds their expectations, where you're anticipating their future need before they know it. And that might be just in terms of, like you say, so the need in terms of, well, I'm going to take a backup size because I know how this is running. I'm going to bring what I know that they want, but I'm also going to bring what I think they might need.
Yeah.
But then it's also so in that kind of scenario, how you're selling them the dream, right? Through showing the potential. So maybe they've not asked for shoes, but you're going to bring some amazing shoes, and you're not going to position it as a sell.
No.
It's just so that they can visualize themselves, if they're trying on the gown, what it's going. Maybe they've already got shoes that they want to wear that they think will work. But
I always bring shoes, because
shoes are.
How many times they tell me not to bring shoes? Do you have shoes? I'm like, luckily for you, yes, but
yeah,
you know, you
exactly.
only get
and the jewelry, and whatever else. So, when they say they're looking for a piece, you curate a look for them.
Yes, exactly.
Then also about knowing what they've bought previously so far. What can you introduce them to that they might just be interested in? That it, is maybe planting the seed for the next sale. Absolutely. Or maybe it wows them and they take it with them. But I think it's like inspiring your client is really important, and taking it beyond that sort of functionality. And it also really boosts the relationship, because it means that you've been thinking about them as an individual. And sometimes you just can't get, it's really hard to get it right. It always depends on the individual. I used to have clients that I knew really well that were really quite difficult to dress. And sometimes I will go and do I used to have one client where I go to their hotel and do an appointment at their hotel when they would come to London. And that was in the days when we used to be able to get stock out of the warehouse. And it was very painful to do. And I used to take about 30 pieces, and sometimes you might only sell 5. But it is that, it's more than showing willing, isn't it, in the stock that you're taking. It's introducing them to ideas they haven't necessarily thought about. And
taking initiative as well, like you said, by being able to look at things that they've previously bought. And this is a lot easier now. back in the day, if you want to use like somewhere like Net-a-Porter as an example, with Farfetch, you know, you would sort of go on their past purchases and what have you. That's not always necessarily the ease. But now if you have their Instagram, or if you have a social platform, you might get a better idea. But sometimes I
also get a better idea of their lifestyle as well,
exactly,
don't you?
for sure, because sometimes that's not something that they again will
something they're going to tell you about.
Exactly.
Unless, you know, you've got to the stage where you know everywhere they're going on holiday and what their family are up to. You know, you kind of get to that stage. But yes, it's so much easier when you can just see it.
Absolutely. And I would, you know, so I always say it's good to kind of bring things that complement, like you said, their lifestyle, or things that they've purchased already before, because like you said, it's giving them an aspiration. It's also showing that you've really taken that deeper interest into, you know, making solutions that maybe not even they thought they had, rather than positioning it as a sale, if you will, and and just being super prepared. So I always kind of find that the more information I can get at the beginning before I meet a client is the best. And like you said, sometimes before doing an actual appointment where I'm sort of bringing 30 plus pieces, I try to, if it's possible, I would try to meet them in person for sure, just so you can get that idea. Now you can rely on social media to kind of, you know, bring, you know, get them to send you looks. Like in the past, we've done like, we would do lookbooks, and we would get them to send them like their favorite style inspiration, and then kind of incorporate that within the lookbook, so they can really see where we're going with these particular styles. Because sometimes visualizing with like a flat lay, which is essentially just the clothes on a white piece of background, doesn't really give them anything. You know, things photoshopped and edited do not always necessarily hold the life. But then if you've got, you know, the look next to something that they've sent you, they can really start to picture themselves and how to get there. Obviously having sizing is really important. And then I always find I like to ask, especially around gowns and events, I always will go, I start talking about hems, necklines, sleeves, corsetry. These are all such simple things that you think, oh, really have to think about that. But there are some people, you know,
then underwear is really important.
Yeah. Do you wear a bra? Are you not going to wear a bra? What size do you wear? Do you have to bring solution wear? For sure, that's a big one.
Shapewear.
Yeah, all the time. Yeah, that's such a huge one actually. Because, you know, a client could be sort of a certain size, but if they're very busty, they absolutely have to wear a bra that can change the neckline that they're wearing. And fabric as well is also important. I've been to events where I remember going to an event in Dubai, and it was sort of November, so obviously it was all full, and velvet was really in, and all these women came in this gorgeous sort of velvet regalia. The event was outside, they were dying. And you have to think about, you know, if you're going to style a customer, like, you know, ask them about the event. Where is it? Is it outside? Is it inside? Are you eating? Do you need something with a little stretch? Do you need something with, you know, no stretch? You know, is it standing up? Do you want a flat shoe to accompany you just in case? It's all these little teeny tiny things, but the most amount of information you can glean from that initial conversation, I think will always put you in a really good stead, so you can be prepared.
Yes, preparation is really key. Preparation and the ability to ask as many questions as possible and think about around, so, you know, as many scenarios as well, especially when there is a specific occasion involved.
Absolutely. And another thing that I always do, because I always find as well, depending on your client, sometimes the time that you've allotted for the appointment doesn't always necessarily flow in the way that you expect it to. Personally, I'm a very quick dresser. Not everyone, I've learned, not everyone is particularly like that. And, you know, sometimes they want to gab and they want to chat and they want to sit down, they want to have a break. And
it's in a social occasion, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure. So you need to have a certain sense of, you know, how much is too much. I think editing is always, be prepared to edit, I think, which is actually, funny enough, not my strong suit. I'm someone who likes options on options, but to a point, you have to be able to say, okay, I need to have a stopping point. But what I would do, which is something that I picked up, was that I would always have like almost like a backup digital wardrobe for the things that I didn't bring, that I thought might work well, but I didn't bring. And this way, there's this.
You've got options without them being there and being overwhelming.
Exactly. And it's always the way, like you said, the one, you know, you could bring everything in the kitchen sink, and the one thing you didn't bring
is the thing that they want.
And you're like, I don't know. Well, I don't know how this happened. So being able to have and also just, you know, I remember sort of being in certain appointments, and the last thing you want to do is be sitting there trying to engage with them, but trying to furiously find things online.
Yeah.
Size, if it's available, trying to give them it just makes for a very clunky experience. So
yes, I completely agree on that front. Yes, to be able to have a way to have a digital edit.
Yeah. And it's just the backup, and it's something that you can go, okay, what about this? So, you know, if I had, I don't know, if I was doing something and, you know, it was like 5 nude shoes, but I thought, you know, I might bring 3, and then the other 2 are the alternatives. So there's always like this alternative backup that you can bring. I think it's a really good idea. And actually, funny enough, I think that if you're a shopper and you want to use a space, I think Brown's personal shopping is actually quite good for that, because they actually sort of operate in a very similar way, in the sense that with their interactive mirrors, you can load up your client's wish list for that particular appointment, pull whatever you want to have in the room, which isn't sort of loads, and then you can have the rest on wish list and literally have it on this screen in the
That's
room.
very cool.
Yeah,
very smart.
And I think it makes for it is really smart, and I think it really makes for a different, you know, like you said, allows you a little breathing room.
It's not yeah, but also it makes it memorable for the client as well, because like for them as a business, that's very smart, because that's a novelty factor. I mean, because actually there's a lot, you know, we know Matches have got their townhouse, and Moda use that kind of model as well. And, you know, in Porto we have the EIP rooms, and, you know, other ways of doing appointments. But to be able to offer that extra something in store, that novelty factor, that's very smart. Point of differentiation.
And what was always really nice, same thing with the Net-a-Porter, like with the EIP suite, having that, they'd be like, you know, I want this, this, and this, and we'd sort of say, I'm going to take care of you. And then, you know, because they're normally staying in London on holiday, what have you, you know, you could literally be like, I'm going to send all this to you, the stuff that you hadn't seen, to you tomorrow or later that day. And so it was all still very immediate, but they actually don't have to carry anything, which is delightful, isn't it?
I mean, that's the thing, actually, the schlep. You know, and sort of factoring that into your logistics. If you're going to them, if you're going to meet them in their hotel, or you're meeting them, you've booked a suite or somewhere to meet them, and you've got to move things around. It's allowing the time, the extra time. Can be a pretty hot, sweaty process. And it's not as glamorous as, you know, rocking up with a couple of shopping bags. So it is worth sort of, you know, building that sort of time factor in. So even if you're not taking a huge amount, at least you can make time to go to the bathroom and make sure that you know, you're as presentable as you were when you left.
Absolutely. And another thing that I also used to do with certain clients, especially ones who I hadn't been able to meet before, sometimes I would show them like an edit a few days before of the pieces I was going to be presenting, because I want to show them, I don't want to because sometimes, like I said, you know, with miscommunication, or maybe it's language barrier, or maybe it's just kind of, you know, differing of, you know, points of view, you can sometimes actually be off just off the mark. And so, and
also, if you are going to the effort, if you're taking stock to them, then at least if they say, oh no, you know, that's not me at all, then you strike it off. And it's, you know, it's a level of refinement and editing that can go on, that can save you time and effort.
100%. And that's what it is that it's being as time efficient as possible, because these are essentially, you know, there's nothing more time consuming, I think, sometimes, than a personal shopping.
They're massively appointment. The amount, you know, when you build in the day, the conversation, the time that you spend selecting, then if you have a follow-up conversation before you meet, like you say, and then you amend it, and then you've got to pack it up, transport it, set up, and that's before you've even conducted the appointment before. And, you know, and also refreshments are really important.
Absolutely. And in fact, that's a good segue, you know, when it's coming to actually setting up the event, or setting up the room, wherever that be, whether it's at their house, whether it's within your organization, what have you. I think if you're within an organization, it's a lot, take a lot of stuff for granted, actually, you know.
Yeah,
rails are there,
because exactly, the equipment's there for you, whereas actually if you're going to meet someone in their hotel room, then it probably isn't.
Absolutely not.
You know, the hanging space, and actually if you're going to meet someone in their hotel, you almost it's likely to be someone that you know quite well, really, that's not going to be bothered about you setting up something for them to arrive at, because it's more intimate and on their terms.
Yeah, absolutely. What I would actually advise, if you are finding that you're going to lots of different you know, if you're going to homes or hotels, there is a really great collapsible rail that you can buy from Plan, and I have to say, it's like, it's not ridiculous.
Oh yeah, Plan, the source of
it folds down, it's on wheels, it extends up to about 6 foot, and it also comes in its own bag. And if that's something that, especially if you're doing a bigger appointment, I think I've done appointments with both, with and without rails, and there's nothing worse when you realize you kind of you, like you said, sometimes if you know them really well, it's less of an issue. But if you don't, and you're kind of having to try and sort of present these looks on a bed, on a, you know, how do you make it look really hard, great, and
a rail makes all the difference.
Yeah, and I think if you can bring a rail, bring it. And I think there's, you know, if you're bringing jewelry and shoes, that can always work. But if you can bring this rail, like I said, it comes in the bag, and also give them an expectation of setup time. I've done that where I did an appointment, I think over 3 or 4 days, with a family who had like a huge 50th birthday planned. And, you know, so we had to take rails, and I was like, okay, if I get there at XYZ, we'll start the appointment at this time, because I knew I'm going to have to take out everything out. And then actually what I did as well is I had a courier take everything for me. So when I came, I'm not sort of like you said, sweating, coming in, schlepping, trying
to
and rails.
It's no joke.
MacBooks and things like that. And actually what happened was the clothes sort of got there before, and then we could literally just start hanging everything straight away. Things were already merchandised, you know, within garment bags, and then you kind of just, you know, have yourself 20 minutes to kind of set up, and then you can sort of dazzle after.
And it's also worth thinking that merchandising through before you even go. So for example, if you know, you've got your pieces packed up in the order you intend to display them, so that you can, you know, if something happens, you know that you can pop the whole look onto hangers, straight onto the rack, and you've pretty much thought through the order. Absolutely. So it's one less thing to think about if you're under pressure.
Oh yeah, I always try to merchandise first of all, because, and otherwise it takes, again, it's more time. You don't necessarily want to be spending on that when you could actually be talking and engaging with the client, and that's what they want you to do. They really want you to engage with them, and you don't want to sort of be distracted. You want to give them your full attention as much as possible. And I also think sometimes in those cases as well, depending if the client minds, or depending on the size of the appointment, bring in an assistant or someone to help you. Will go along.
Yeah, if you've got the resource, someone who can be unpacking and packing and helping you in the background, I think it's super helpful.
Absolutely. And are there any kind of, you know, you mentioned refreshments and things like that, of bringing those, you know, if you have to bring those with you, or maybe having that ordered with like a hotel suite, I think is important. Depending on the client, are you, you know, champagne, no champagne, juice, water, what do you think?
I think it's all about, you've obviously got, there are cultural considerations that people need to be aware of, time of day, and, you know, try and gauge it as part of your preliminary planning conversations, really. So if you're agreeing at a time and a date, you know, that's almost your first step. It's building it into the conversation in a subtle way. And it does depend where you're hosting it, because if you're in their home, then you're not really providing refreshments. Exactly. But if you're going, if you know, you've got a room in a hotel, then you'd want to be able to pre-order something. So you know, I think your sort of basics around waters, probably, you know, if you don't know the client well, it's probably best to go with waters, and then ask, you know, if they'd like tea, coffee, you know, be able to offer them a selection that you think's appropriate for the time of day, that you can order when they get there. But yes, at least make sure that you always need water, because it's hot work trying on clothes.
Work. I'm for sure. And I also think sometimes with the whole you know, if depending on how you know the client or what have you, you know, bringing in like, or having access to, say, bottles of champagne, it can go either way. Sometimes, you know, they get a little lightheaded. It can slow the show. It can
accelerate the show. It can mean bad decisions. It can mean that they buy more and then they don't really worry about it. It can help with decision making. Equally, it can create returns. So it does just kind of depend on the individual. And I suppose if you've had an appointment with them before and you know it's not helped, maybe it's something that, you know, you steer away from in the nicest possible way, and you know, learn. But you know, also you also want it to be fun, right? It depends what the client wants out of the appointment, and I guess that's about understanding them and the scenario, because actually if it's more of a social event for them, and they're not there for a serious shop, and it's more about relationship building and a bit of a treat, you know, maybe it's just moderation.
Oh, absolutely. And in terms of like any extras to dress the room, do you suggest, you know, again, this is obviously depending on where you're doing it, you know, flowers, magazines, do you think it's necessary, candles, anything like that? Or do you think it's really just about how you present, you know, the pieces that you've brought?
I think if you, a lot of it is down to the presentation, but you also want to create an atmosphere, right? Because you're creating an experience. So you almost want to think about your different senses. So flowers and candles can work really well. And it does, you know, so for example, at Net-a-Porter, we would always do that kind of thing to dress the suite, because otherwise it was quite a plain room, but you may not need it in a hotel room.
Right. Yes, it's true.
Because, you know, the suite speaks for itself. So, and maybe you might just take a candle with you if you're going into someone's home, but on the other hand, they may have candles there. So, you know, I think smell is definitely one to be aware of. Maybe you might want to think about some music.
Yeah, absolutely.
It relaxes and sets the scene.
And
background music, exactly. So something, you know, and maybe you might want something a little more upbeat if you're doing something in the evening, than, you know, just really depending on the time of day. We've talked about drinks. You might want to think about some kind of canapes or fruit and croissants if it's in the morning and it's a breakfast meeting. Offer tea, coffee and orange juice.
So simple.
Have some small pastries and lovely fruit available. Done. I can remember a very early event we did that we had all these amazing mini like baklava sweets when women were coming in the afternoon, and they were lovely because they were just a little mouthful of honeyed nutty sweetness. And I suppose the other thing is, you know, and it does come back to knowing your client. People are so aware of what they're eating. It can be quite difficult. So so sometimes it's just about keeping it simple.
Especially now, being really aware of what you're serving, actually, I suppose, you know, between you know, with dietary restrictions, actually, it's a really important. So whatever you get or bring or what have you, may be really clear about what it is, you know, so you're not sort of misleading them into having nuts and they've got a nut allergy.
Exactly.
It could be an absolute disaster. When you're in the appointment, in terms of, you know, what to wear, and, you know, subconsciously how you sell, I think obviously this is an extension of personality and skill and what have you, but do you have any thoughts around that in terms of, you know, I know some people would love it, you know, when you wear all black and it's kind of like all about the client, but then, you know, what do you think? Do you think it matters?
I think it's actually, you need to look, it's important to dress to be true to yourself, because it's such a personal relationship that inevitably that will be some part of the reason the client's with you. However, it's also really important to be aware that clients can be, if you're overdressed or overgroomed, some clients will be intimidated by that.
I agree. Yeah.
So yeah, so it's striking the balance really, and not going, you need to feel accessible to the client, essentially.
And approachable.
Yeah. And so if you know that your client is super confident, fashion forward, and if you wear something that she's going to be like, I love that, I want it as well, then go for it.
Yeah.
But, you know, for a client who's not so confident and is really, you know, maybe is looking for your guidance, so you know, just think about how you can, it is about making the client feel really comfortable, and how you present yourself is a really important part of that. So you are probably not going to go in jeans and trainers.
Yeah.
However, maybe if they're golden goose, you might get away with them styled in a certain way. So, but you know, it all comes back to knowing your client and what they would expect of you. I mean, you know, classically, we, you know, within businesses, you tend to defer to black because it's uniform and nondescript, but you know, it can, and it can be really chic and stylish. So, you know, it is, you are presenting yourself and your services to the client. So you're either thinking about it, you've got to be thinking about it, the lasting impression that the whole experience is going to leave on them, and that includes how you look. So wash your hair.
Yeah.
We're stating the obvious here. Do your nails.
Yeah.
And put your face on.
Oh,
and you also need to feel confident too, because actually, I mean, especially now, but if you've been dealing with a lot of clients digitally for a while, you can get out of the way of it. And I think, you know, we've all experienced a bit of that through seeing people less over this rather odd lockdown period. So yeah, so, you know, it's also, you want to make the client feel comfortable, and you need to feel comfortable as well. And, you know, you are going to, maybe you would be in trousers because actually it's more practical.
Oh, absolutely. And I always think
if you're like kneeling down, dealing with hems, or
just about to say that exactly. You don't know what you're going to be zipping up, buckling. So be comfortable. I think confident and comfortable. And like you said, sort of, you know, should be clean hair, very clean nails, and, you know, even don't wear a lot, like, you know, look fresh, I suppose.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
And
no makeup is all good.
Yeah,
but it's about looking fresh and prepared.
Exactly, and professional. And I think there's always like a little, you can always tell, once you work in a few offices, you can always tell who's meeting a client, because there tends to be a certain type of a uniform of, you know, it's
they've got the best shoes on and the best bag.
Yeah, exactly. And it's always a blazer and a smart top. But it's good, because actually I always used to think about things like, if I get hot, I don't want to be wearing something that I can't take off. If I have to kneel down,
very true.
You know, wear something short with, you know, with my backside might be showing if I'm buckling down. You know, you have to think about these types of practical things.
Yeah, or if you're wearing a really long dress and then you're tripping over it when you lean down. I mean, it's
and wear a comfy shoe, because like you said, you don't sometimes know how long these appointments are going to go for, unless you're super versed in wearing heels for 17 hours. I am not. But, you know, I always try and wear like a shoe that I know I can sort of withstand for the full day, or I bring a flat with me just so I can change after the flat. Yeah, because I hate to feel uncomfortable. I don't feel like, again, it's this idea of, and I say the same thing with customers, if you're not comfortable in what you're wearing, that doesn't matter how amazing it looks, all you're focusing on is how uncomfortable you are. So again, it's the distraction. What are your thoughts around steering clients in the right direction? You know what it's like, you know, whether it's a client who really doesn't see what you see, which is when it turns into much more of a psychotherapist session. In terms of, I mean, I've been there, like, you know, girls looking fabulous and going, I can't wear this. I'm, you know, and I'm like, you look incredible. Or them really latching onto something that they shouldn't latch onto. I
think honesty is actually really key. I mean, ultimately, if the client looks fabulous in something but they can't see it, then you can do your bit, but you're kind of fighting a losing battle, because ultimately it means even if they do go with it, they probably won't be comfortable in it.
Yeah.
So, and it will be something that will sit in their wardrobe and they won't wear, and then that's just not good for anybody. So I always took the approach of being really honest with clients about when something worked or it didn't. And I mean, some people will sell anything to anybody, but I think if you are looking to build a longer term rapport with your client, honesty is critical.
I agree.
And, you know, for the most part, it will be a reason that people come back to you, because it creates trust.
Yeah.
And they don't feel they're being oversold to, and they feel that you've got their best interests at heart, and all of that should lead to the repeat appointment.
Absolutely.
And even if, you know, you walk away at the end of the day and nothing has been right for them, I think it's also, you know, you just have to roll with it, don't you? And
it happens.
It happens, and sometimes things don't work out, but probably there will be an opening there for a follow-up anyway.
Yeah.
And you know, it's just about how you then make the most of maybe you've got to know them a little better, you can understand their needs better, and how you can then make the most of the next opportunity. Because executed well, there should generally always be a next opportunity, unless there's a personal situation that's going on in their world that puts things outside of your control.
Oh, for sure. And I think also, you know, you can be honest, but this tact is still
tact is, yes, you know, exactly.
Don't be like, it's hideous, take it off. I mean, again, unless you know this client.
Choice of words is really important.
And also,
ultimately, you want to make the client feel great about themselves.
Yeah, exactly.
That's your objective.
And I always used to find it, and I took this from being at Topshop, because when I first started personal shopping, because you didn't actually really have much to go on before the client would come. So you had a very sort of small brief, and also ultimately you're subjected to the stock that's there on the day, which, you know, depending on the time, depending on, you know, if it's a Saturday at 3 o'clock in the afternoon and they're a very small size, or maybe they're on the other side of the scale in terms of, you know, maybe they're like a size 16, you know that you're already limited. So you would always try to prepare as much as possible. But here's the thing, regardless of what the size was, sometimes there was this thing where if it didn't look right, or if it's about them. And I used to find that, you know, what I used to find used to go a long way was letting them know why something is not necessarily working for them. And without it's not really about size. It can be about cut. Giving them an education about fit.
Yeah, exactly.
This is not the rise for you. This is your body shape. This is something that you actually need. And providing the solution, or at least showing them something else, even if you don't necessarily have it in store or have it with you at the time, I think would, you know, it gives them confidence that it's not a me thing. You know, I think a lot of you know, women, and I'm sure men too, they internalize a lot of this idea of if things don't look great, or things don't look how they want it to look, because
we all have an idea of how we think we're going to look in something. And it just and when you really like something, that's normally a big part of why you like it, because you envisage that it's going to make you look a certain way, and it's not always the reality, and it can be really disappointing.
Absolutely. And I always used to, you know, a lot of women will come to you and say, oh, it's because I'm short, it's because I'm this, I'm not supposed to wear that. And I always used to subscribe to this. I don't believe that. And I used to say, I'm 5'2" and I'm this size, and I basically wear whatever, but I find the fit that fits me. So I, you know, one classic example is jumpsuits. The amount of women go, I can't wear a jumpsuit. Jumpsuits are not for me. And I'm like, I said, how many jumpsuits have you ever tried on? They're like 3. I said, I've tried on like 100. I would say 78% have not worked for me. But I find the ones that do fit, and those are the ones I keep. I said it's much more, it's not a one size fits all situation. It's, you know, like I said, it's sometimes, and it's understanding what your body looks like. You know, you can be a short person or a very tall person, but whether you have long legs or a short torso or vice versa can make all the difference in a particular dress. It has nothing to do with the fact that you're tall or the fact that you're short. So kind of giving them that education, I think, also gives them a little more.
Yeah, it's a massive opportunity.
Yeah, and giving them a solution every time, not just saying, oh no, that doesn't look right, move on. You know, showing them an alternative or something better, or, you know, something that they can sort of lean on for next time maybe, will always inspire that type of confidence. So, you know, regardless of whether the appointment has been successful in terms of sales or not, you know, what's your next follow-up tips?
So I think, you know, it's about, you probably have got 3 steps in follow-up. The first one is always a thank you.
Yeah,
Should always be, it was so lovely to see you, thanks for taking the time, you know, and I think and you should do that within 24 hours. Like, that should be something that happens really instantaneously. You know your client, you know how they like to be contacted. If it can be as simple as a text message, it can be as elaborate as a lovely card, you know, whatever's appropriate for them. And if you're sending them things afterwards, maybe it's a note that goes with the pieces that you're sending to them that they've bought, but there should always be a thank you.
Yeah.
And then there's probably a follow-up that has built on the conversation that you've had whilst you're there. So there's more, you know, there's more than likely to be something you've discussed. Even if you've not identified a need, it's maybe something you've talked about. So then you've got the opportunity maybe a week later to, you know, follow up and be like, oh, you remember you were talking about this bag, so I found this, and, you know, I'll send you some more information on it, or keeping it soft and light, but, you know, relevant.
Yeah. Conversation. And I suppose that's half the appointment actually, is that half of the time, or 90% of your attention should be on the appointment, but I sometimes actually realize as you're talking that 10% of it is like taking notes.
Yeah, that is really key, like, to spend that time either during or after, just making notes of all the different conversations that you've had.
I would go back to my desk and like furiously type everything that we talked about, things that they, you know, and again, now it's much easier because we have better technology, but, you know, I would snap the things that maybe they said that they liked, or screenshot the things that they said that they might want for next time, or whatever it is. So I've got this like sort of, you know, person, I'd go through it and be like, you know, write it all down before I forget it. Just in case. And like you said, then you've got something to talk to them about the next time, rather than trying to remember a week later, like you said.
So yeah, I mean, I think, you know, there's a thank you follow-up, there's a practical follow-up probably of next steps, logistics that maybe have come up, and then there's an inspirational follow-up that should be about taking you through to the next sale, whether that's an appointment or an order, or, you know, the next, you know, planning next steps.
Absolutely. And kind of taking into consideration, like sometimes they might be talking about things off the cuff, like their birthday's coming up, or they've got something coming up, and just noting around the time, so you can just say, oh, let me know when your birthday
clienteling
time is. Yeah, exactly. Again, it shows them that you're listening, shows them that you're and also it's giving you opportunity to see them again, or to work with them again, to kind of keep deepening that rapport.
And so lovely always, you know, when you unearth these key life dates, moments that are going to be coming up in their lives. So when you follow up, to be able to send them flowers when it's appropriate, or a small gift, and yeah, really show them that you have been listening, and actually it's not just all about their next credit card bill.
Absolutely.
It's about you giving more to them too.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I remember working with someone from the events team, and on, you know, it was a shopping event, so it wasn't quite a personal shopping experience, and, you know, we had some okay sales, but it wasn't huge. And it wasn't until a week later, and I sort of gave her the sales report, and she was like, oh, how did this happen? I'm like, oh, we follow up with everyone, and then you do this, you know. And she said, I never knew how much of the follow-up could impact the success of that event.
Yeah, not everything happens on the day. You know, there's a client who will want to take it with her and she will want that instant gratification. Then you've got a client who people will go away and think about things a bit, you know, and subconsciously mull it over. So it's, you know, if you've got someone that's on the fence, I think that's really vital to note down and follow up on, because they potentially halfway there already, and maybe they just need to go back and have that internal conversation with themselves.
Absolutely. And I think
there's follow-ups is, you know, so important.
Absolutely. And I think it's knowing the client, or trying to anticipate what type of client you have at the time. You know, are they kind of like what, you know, a supermarket sweeper, and they'll just be like, yes, yes, yes,
and then send it all back,
or are they the type of person, you know, it's like knowing when to kind of, you know, I wouldn't say the hard sell, but knowing kind of when to kind of do the push and when to actually hold back and let them sort of come to you almost. And like you said,
such a fine line.
It is a fine line. And I think, you know, if behavioral attributes are so important when it comes to this job, especially when you get to start seeing people, you know, in appointments or one-to-ones and what have you, and really being able to like assess people's behavior so you can gauge how to be, and, you know, wanting to kind of almost like meet them where they are, goes such a long way. And I think if there's anything you can do is like really take that on, because if you only have one style of selling, if you will,
you need to be able to adapt to the individual and what they're going to want from the situation. So, you know, is it all very light-hearted, or actually do they want something that's incredibly efficient, which means that you need the product they want, the information on the product they're going to ask you need to know it so that you can either look it up really quickly or rattle it off your tongue, know that you're going to have to deliver it somewhere. It's almost like that attention, that client and you do get them that will want much more functional attention to detail approach versus someone who just, you know, is really coming for the chat and the inspiration. You know, and the full spectrum in between. There's a really interesting personality sort of trait called the DISC profile, which I was introduced to it earlier in the year, and actually it was the first time I'd heard of it, and I really realized that actually most of us could identify clients that would fit into the 4 profiles. And it's a wheel, and it's really applicable actually to selling techniques and understanding the kind of experience that you need to deliver to clients.
Oh, that's really interesting. I will have to if you've got any literature on that, we'll share it.
Yes, I will look that up and send it to you so you can share it.
Because I think I was quite lucky personally, because I've studied psychology, and so I'd taken a lot of this kind of behavioral, what I was, you know, viewing.
A lot of us do it intuitively, but sometimes for people for who, if it even if you do it intuitively, it's that affirmation that you're doing it the right way.
Yeah, and also being able to actually use it as a skill set. You know,
yes,
you said sometimes it is about planning it into a strategy as opposed to kind of, like you said, relying on the intuition. So it's really fascinating actually how you can sort of really adapt and really change a whole client's perspective on, you know, in an appointment or on a call or whatever it is, just by kind of having an understanding of their behaviors and what they're really trying to get. But just one more thing before we go, because you were talking about knowing the pricing, and I just thought, unless you've pulled things from the store, typically you won't have pricing available on the pieces. So that's absolutely important. Have your price list.
Having a
there's
price
nothing
list,
working
definitely.
Let me just look. And then scrolling through trying to find pieces on pricing, and like you said, again, it advocates for a bit of a clunky process sometimes, and so being super prepared in those senses as well will go a long way. But as always, Helen, this has been amazing, really informative, really fun. It's made me want to do lots of appointments now again.
No, yes.
Meet clients and stuff. Hopefully now, because things are opening up, that will be much more of a reality.
To become a thing again.
Yeah, doing appointments more and more, and clients will be able to travel again.
People have events to go to.
And events to actually go to wear said clothes, exactly. So if there's, as always, if there's any more questions that our members or audience are watching that they have, and they want to send them through, please do. We'll be happy to answer them. And happy Friday. Have a really amazing weekend.
Yes, you too. Happy
Thank
Friday.
you.
Speak to you
Bye,
soon,
Helen.
Dom.
See you.
Bye.
Bye.